All right, we are being recorded, and so Rachel and I have taken care of our intros inside of this presentation, and if y'all have any questions at the end of the recording, Rachel and I will both be here to answer any of those. So here we go.
Hi, Galileo Conference attendees. Thank you so much for being here with us today. We're excited to share with you some of the outreach and collaborative events we've done together over the last year. This is Disco with the DLG. We have been designing collaborative outreach events for homeschoolers across the state to encourage them to explore the state's free resources through the Digital Library of Georgia, Galileo, National History Day, all for the homeschool communities across the state. But primarily, this session is going to talk about some of the Northeast Georgia communities that we've been able to personally outreach to. I am Rachel Evans, Metadata Services and Special Collections Librarian at the Alexander Campbell King Law Library. And I'm here today with Mandy Mastrovita from the Digital Library of Georgia. I've had so much fun getting to know and working with Mandy through the Digital Library of Georgia. And in addition to getting to collaborate with the law school's resources being harvested and pulled into and made discoverable by the Digital Library of Georgia, I have had the wonderful opportunity to bring Mandy and the resources from the Digital Library of Georgia and Galileo towards the homeschool community as a homeschooling parent myself. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mandy to share some of those foundational resources and why we are doing outreach to this underserved community in the state.
Okay, I guess we can go with the next slide. Okay, and this is just, and Rachel probably knows this better than I do. I just included the mission statement and just brief information so you could get some, learn a little bit about the Firefly homeschool community who we partnered with last year and this year. Or actually just, we've just worked with folks there and have had a really great set of experiences to report on. And so this is just, standard mission statement, vision statement, and a description of the classes. Next slide. Great. Okay. So I actually collected this stat last year, but it was such a dramatic rise in the trend of growth in homeschooling in the United States that I wanted to keep it in this year's presentation as well, because you can just see that it has been an exponential amount of growth over the last 50 years or so. Okay, and again, this is from our first event that was in January of 2023. Just a few takeaways from homeschooling that this particular community responds to, in that homeschooling supports neurodivergent kids, provides flexibility when travel is part of a parent's career. One of the issues for instructors, who are usually the parents, they find it difficult to determine if paid or free services or resources offer the best quality or value. Students generally respond well to hands-on and active learning. Instructors looking for resources, they're looking for things that are rigorous. In this homeschool community, they are looking for secular resources and also authoritative resources. There is another community, or I should say, sort of the homeschool communities in Georgia are kind of, they belong to, there are two subgroups. There are the secular homeschoolers and then the religious homeschoolers. And so we were working with the secular homeschoolers. The books are sought first, then primary sources, and then articles, but this may depend on the grade level. Instructors are usually looking for things that are fun and engaging to keep everyone's attentions up. Content must be responsive to their children's needs. And then the last thing was that when we embarked on this presentation last year, most families were not aware of Galileo or the DLG. So I think we've grown quite a bit. Next slide. Okay. One thing that's important is to know is that homeschool kids don't have embedded media specialists. Parents are always trying to stay engaged with online searching for easy, convenient, and accurate answers. And as librarians, they appreciate us being able to direct them how to seek and identify authoritative resources that they can access easily and to get their information from accurate information ecospheres, which in the age of increased AI generated garbage is a challenge. Okay, so this is why Galileo is better than Google. This was a slide I showed to the kids that I spoke to. It's like, Google sucks now. And why Galileo is better than Google. Next slide. Google searches are based on advertising keywords. You know this if you're a marketer. And because a lot of Google, Google, I don't know if it was 1.0 and now it's 2.0 or whatever, but Google before Google Analytics 4 was more, their information sets were more authoritative and reliable, trustworthy. And now, just everything is just like garbage marketing terms. I was trying to look up, the name of a song, like the author of a song for some friends of mine, and Google wouldn't even take me to the correct result. They took me to the result of the most popular version of that song, but not the song like that was performed and written by the person who created it. So it was garbage. Those Google searches are also more than likely to drive you to a place where you have to buy something, because those AdWords are weighted based on advertisers who pay for them. So you don't want that when you're looking for, academic, authoritative, trustworthy sources. Next page. Thanks. Okay, so we showed them the Galileo bento search, which we all love. Next slide. We showed them how to use DLG materials and how to cite them. And we made a big point of targeting them towards reusable materials, so they can just mix up whatever they want and not, you have the simplest, fastest access to something to share. But then also, when you have something that you need to share and cite its source because you've used its idea, or you've been influenced by it in some way, we have the means to help you cite. Okay, and the New Georgia Encyclopedia, of course, this isn't new to anyone in the Galileo environment, but just, again, showing them like how the New Georgia Encyclopedia is just like the great place to start if you're writing about something, because those articles are so well researched and proofread and vetted, that, it's just always a great place to start. And I think that, kids are really well served by going there first when they're thinking about their paper topics. Yeah, okay. And then Georgia Exhibits just shows the reason why Georgia Exhibits is special. And this is a project that DLG and NGE worked on together. Again, not news in the Galileo environment, but it was great for students to be able to see examples of stories that might not have popped their way into the news or, the common you know, the common knowledge of the day, because you know, they were you know, kind of hidden in the archives. We call a lot of the work of bringing these sorts of resources out, reparative description, and you know, and you know, eliminating invisibility in the archives, because we know that, you know, traditionally certain groups of people were not granted you know, historical space. And you know, Georgia Exhibits is just a you know, a nice example of DLG NGE staff working together with graduate students and coming up together with these exhibit pieces that pull out just, you know, hundreds of items that exist in archives and libraries across Georgia. We also have DLG educator resources, which were designed and fulfill the criteria established in the Georgia Standards of Excellence teaching units that were developed by the Georgia Department of Education for social studies. And so these educator resources all have link lists and collections and newspapers and just, you know, a huge amount of information, subject headings, like, so that you can, you know what topics to search with when you're delving into a topic. And so, you know, we were able to show the kids those tools as well. Okay, so these it's kind of what I've already described: suggested DLG collection searches, Georgia Historical Society resources. For DPLA, it's great that we have an association with DPLA, because so much social studies learning is national, like after a certain grade level. And so you have the panoply of all of the archives and libraries and cultural heritage institutions that participate with DPLA, where you can also find, you know, research, archival materials, et cetera, writ large across the United States. And of course, Georgia historic newspapers chronicling America for national coverage, new, you know, NGE articles, as I've said, also national resources for GPB and PBS, and a poster that we roll out every month for each GSE module. And those are just some of the posters that we've worked on. You know, you'll see, you know, things from the newspapers, things from archives, and you know, we really do you know, when we were featuring archival materials, you know, we did our best to work with as many people across the state as possible to make these you know, these actual pieces, you know, diverse as well, representing other you know, places in the state. And you know, and we also have continued this work with the Georgia Newspaper Project and the National Digital Newspaper Program that have all you know, sent resources to Chronicling America at the Library of Congress. And you can see here you know, great national as well as state coverage, thanks to that partnership. And then for the more advanced history students, we were able to show them National History Day Georgia resources. And National History Day Georgia just is such a great project for these kids, because they are so good at really diving deep into topics that they're interested in. And the structure of National History Day really, you know, it's great for them, and it's a great opportunity for them to show, you know, how well they work, how well they write, you know, and you know, make it a social occasion where they meet other other students and teachers, you know, interested in history. Yeah, so this is great for them too. Okay, I think, oh, this is, okay. I was gonna ask you, Rachel, but I think I can handle this. We wanted to also just let you know that we only spoke to Firefly. Firefly is like one of, you know, actually like a healthy amount of homeschool organizations that are in the Athens area. I mean, this is just Athens, and we've already got like six folks, sorry, not folks, but groups that Rachel has successfully reached out to. So so that's great.
Yeah, and I think it's important to touch on the fact that what Mandy said much earlier, which is that obviously homeschooling is sort of growing, and I think there's been like even more of like an exponential growth since the pandemic, where families realized that for some students, some parents and their kids, it was maybe a healthier relationship for their kid, particularly those neurodivergent kids, if they are learning in unique ways, for them to enjoy the learning process, and that maybe their strengths, their particular strengths, were better suited in a home learning environment where there was more of a one-on-one dynamic. I personally know in the Athens area that there are other parents who are full-time working parents who are still choosing to like homeschool their kids because they feel like their kids' learning needs are just better served in a smaller environment. And that looks dramatically different for different families. Some of them are fortunate enough to have a stay-at-home parent who's able to manage that. Others are fortunate enough to be able to afford someone to stay with the kids and to sort of guide them through a very particular curriculum. And then there's a lot of online curriculum that is both private and public. So homeschooling, it looks very different than what you might think it looks like. All of that is to say that there's a lot of homeschoolers who still, depending on the expertise of the parent, are searching for resources because maybe they don't know what is free and available to them throughout the state. Even if they're very educated parents and families, they may or may not be aware of the Digital Library of Georgia or any of the other related resources that Mandy was talking about earlier. And so just making people aware of the resources has been a huge success for us in these communities. And so I just wanted to share sort of the inside scoop that like it is really difficult to reach these families. Sometimes they are sort of in plain sight, and maybe you have a coworker who's a homeschooler and you just didn't even realize it. It's hard to gauge the community, how big it is, where it is, how to meet them where they are, because these sort of cooperatives and the communities that they are sort of sharing that learning system with one another, they can be difficult to get into those groups. Almost all of them operate in some way, in some form of a closed online group or forum. And so if you're not a member of that group, you wouldn't have an awareness of when their events are, what their schedules look like, what best times of days they would be available for finding out resources or organizing an event or bringing in someone for an outreach opportunity. So gauging these needs sometimes comes from having that sort of focus group. And Mandy and I, when we embarked on this last year, we started by building a list of resources and trying to gauge the community with some polls that Mandy helped me create, and then I just posted those to these groups in those closed Facebook groups and other forums that I was a part of, being a homeschooling parent. Success and outreach and promotion, that has really looked very different. Our first experience that we presented on previously, we attempted to do a hybrid presentation. The in-person seemed like it was going to be really successful. We had a lot of people attempt to come or commit to come and RSVP. Ultimately, we had more people who reviewed the recording. So it was very good that Mandy was able to supply that as a hybrid event and put up a recording. And then I was able to just share the links to the resources that Mandy created with the community. And we were able to sort of gauge from that experience how we could better meet the needs of the community in the future. What we learned from that was that a lot of people had difficulty finding parking and coming from out of town, because many of the people who come to any of these co-ops in the Athens area, it's about half and half of who actually live in what you would call the Athens area and who live in Northeast Georgia in general and are commuting in for that support. Some of these families live very far outside of Athens, up in Brazelton, or really far over to like Lawrenceville. So it kind of goes in all directions, and they're commuting, and they're only coming into town once or twice a week for the co-op opportunities. So we realized that we really needed to target those times and locations that they were already going to be in Athens for a co-op opportunity, and maybe that would get more of a captive audience and FaceTime with either the parents or the students or both. And working with a class that already existed at one of the co-ops might be a better approach. But ultimately, we still had pretty big success. 17 families were reached from that initial opportunity. And we tried again this year in 2024.
Oh,
so to
Rachel,
plan,
Rachel,
yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you. I also want to say I forgot to, the weather was terrible that day too.
It was.
Yeah. Okay, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the weather wasn't on our side that day either. So to provide future opportunities, we decided to take a double event approach. Like I said, we looked at the schedule for the upcoming co-op, what its classes would be, which one might fit the scope of being a natural fit for a member of Galileo and the Digital Library of Georgia to physically come to the co-op and present some of the resources and look for an opportunity where it would really fit in with their class and what they were learning and something they were working on. So there was a small class in the fall 2023 and spring 2024. It was only 4 students, but it was the perfect opportunity for Mandy to come in January of 2024, almost 1 year after we had our initial hybrid outreach event. And she was able to ask them questions about their paper topics, provide an actual live demo of Galileo's resources. The Galileo bento search was really popular with the kids, explaining the Google search process and how all of that works from the same perspective that she did earlier in this presentation, and also sharing those Georgia exhibits, Georgia historical newspapers, DPLA, and the New Georgia Encyclopedia. And I think the students learned a lot, and they were able to ask Mandy questions in an environment that wasn't like a public library setting where they might have stumbled in with their parents and not really had guidance on what they were working on, what kinds of questions to ask, as well as a lot of public library workers may or may not be as familiar with how to navigate homeschool students getting through and accessing Galileo and DLG resources. And so Mandy was also able to walk them through that with how to find and access Galileo using their Pines Public Library card number and everything. So this is a photo here of Mandy in class with these 4 students. And I think they really benefited a lot from having that one-on-one attention. And then over the next few weeks, as they worked on their paper and putting together a project for the homeschool's STEM and research fair, they were able to continue to sort of ask those questions back and forth and use the resources that Mandy had shared with them. So that was a small number of students. but very in-depth outreach, really meeting their needs in the classroom for particular projects. A little bit later in the semester, late March of 2024, we had the homeschool co-op had its first organized event. I was a little bit a part of this since my own son goes to this co-op. And so a bunch of the parents got together and organized their first science fair, STEM fair, with some research projects as well. And here on the left-hand side of the slide, you can see some pictures that I took of some of those high school students, middle and high school students that Mandy was able to personally help with their research and some of the products of their research using the state's resources. On the right-hand side of the slide, you can also see just a big resource table of library, National History Day, both public and academic library resources that the community was able to come to the fair and pick up. We had a huge success with this particular event, and there were over 70 families that came and participated, and over 20 student projects. Not all of them were writing and research projects or history projects. It was a big mix since it was a STEM fair, but there was a nice percentage of projects of students who had used what they learned about the Digital Library of Georgia resources for their writing. And it was a great, like, big event opportunity for us to talk about these resources being available to the community. And so I wanted to share the results. This is how the outreach has grown, thanks to Mandy providing these outreach opportunities to this community that can be really tricky to reach. That 2023 hybrid event, we had 17 families. That spring class session, which was in January of 2024, we had the 4 students and 1 parent attending. And then in the spring, later in the spring, March 2024, with the big fair, we had a total of 74 families who were able to attend and picked up items from that tabling event of library resources, including National History Day, GALILEO, and Digital Library of Georgia resources. And I'm going to turn it back to Mandy.
Well, yay. Okay, so I've outlined all of the links to our presentations in order so that if you want to see sort of the progression of our interaction with the Firefly community, you can start with the first instructional webinar where I've shared the recording of the webinar so you can see what I'm saying to the families, students, as well as the slide deck. And then when I went back almost a year later, this past January, I've got the slide deck from my classroom visit. And I will say, you can always save yourself with a good QR code of your slide deck, because the room that we were teaching in had lost its internet connection completely. And I got a new Mac that did not have a USB-C or USB-A drive. So I did, however, have a QR code for my for my presentation, and we were all in that photograph that Rachel showed. We are all looking at everything on our smartphones, so it was a huge it was a huge save. So but you when you work with kids and you work with parents and you work in these situations, you learn how to pivot. Okay, and so then as far as the reporting back to GALILEO stuff was concerned, I have the slide deck from last June's presentation of Rachel's and mine, and of course the slide deck for this one. I will say one last thing before Rachel gets into the thank yous. I spend a lot of work with arts and humanities centered data, and all of your successes are not quantifiable, like with these sorts of themes, concepts, and kinds of progression. Like, I think Rachel did a really great job of showing how, we're able to turn some of this work into something quantifiable. And we're both very proud of that.
It's really tricky to capture because each of the events where we were able to share these free resources with this community, they look very different. And the way that we're able to communicate, that initial one was really aimed at the parents and hoping to establish some communication with them and giving them an awareness of the resources and providing them with the DLG's link sets, and the posters and things that parents could use when they were teaching. Then sort of the second session was very much centered on that one-on-one with the students, allowing them to sit with their own device and explore the resources and learn how to access Galileo and learn with their own topic idea in mind, how to like search for that and leverage those resources for themselves and then take that back to their family, right? A lot of these families are multi-kid families where those resources will be sort of shared organically through the community. So even though that was only 4 students, those 4 families, it sort of exponentially does that outreach on its own, by way of that those students were in a very small writing and research class, but they're also in other co-ops that they go to at other parts of the week with other families who are exploring history topics or science topics. And so perhaps they're going to share that knowledge with other students, with their parents who may share it with other parents. And so it's very hard to quantify that. I feel like our biggest success with the big outreach event and having a tabling event was that we were able to sort of keep a tally mark of how many parents picked up a pamphlet and how many parents asked a question about the resources at the table. And so that's something we could count much more than we can't really quantify the other things, even though they're much more in-depth pieces of outreach. So it's been really interesting to see how Mandy was able to like come into these groups and share the information and how that looks different for the different audiences and how it may grow over time. Since this is continuing to be a very a group of learners that is growing across the state and across the nation. And we just want to say thank you and open up for questions as well. Really excited to be able to continue sharing this, my firsthand experience. It makes me very excited as a parent of a kid who is approaching the age of some of the sessions that Mandy's been able to provide, that the state has resources that are free and available for students as they come to these different subjects and junctures in their educational trajectory. And so feel free to reach out to me and Mandy.
Oh, sure. And I love this kind of outreach work. I find it's very creative and responsive, and I feel really gives us a chance to see, how closely these students are, like following us and listening to us and how, enraptured they are by their projects. I mean, I love that little Amelie project, the little tent project. That was just fantastic. But yeah, this is it's a lot of work, but a lot of fun too.
And to close, I'm actually going to end on this slide that Mandy talked about. Thank you so much for joining us. You should be able to access these slides through Galileo. We've submitted these, and we hope that you'll explore the previous slide decks, the previous recordings. And we haven't set any plans yet for continuing this, but I do know that the communities in the coming year in 2025 are already planning another STEM and research fair. And so I hope that they will be once again welcoming to having a library resource table, and we'll put some more pamphlets out and keep the dialogue going and continue sending students who have questions towards the DLG and other Galileo resources.
Yay!
Okay, stop the share. If anyone, oh, let me also share the URL for the presentation. Oops.
Hi, Galileo conference attendees. Thank you so
Oops.
much for being.
There we go. I'm sharing it. And do we have any cues from the audience?
It looks like there's a thank you very much, or thank you for the
Okay.
presentation.
Yay. All right, and then there are our slides and our I'm looking for the the link for the presentation they'll be able to get through Sched. And if there are any questions, just let us know.
I was going to say, we'll give it a second to see if anybody is furiously typing, but I will say you all are available for questions if someone wants to talk more in depth.
Of course. Yep.
I can mention that the one slide that had the list of the other communities, I think there will be more opportunities, should we continue to have the time and energy to do this sort of outreach to these groups where there seems to be even more collaboration between multiple co-op groups that were previously very siloed in the community. And it's on the rise now for there to be more secular groups as well. I don't know if that's something that we reiterated specifically, but that one of the things that's unique about some of these co-ops, particularly in the Northeast Georgia area, is that people tend to think of homeschoolers as being very making those decisions for political or religious reasons, but this is a very different group that is making them for a lot of different reasons. And so it makes for a very interesting and diverse set of students and parents and opportunities where they're exploring all sorts of topics that these resources really support very well. And so one of those big communities that's coming up that's in the Athens area, the Learners Collective, is designed very differently than the classic co-op, where they essentially have a facilitator, and it's primarily for only older students. So unfortunately, my kid is not old enough yet to participate in this one, but it's a very unique model where there's a facilitator and they sort of go on these explorations that are 4 to 6 weeks at a time. And the facilitator is really just there to let the students do their own directed learning. So I feel like that would be a super great group. Their model of learning makes it a very welcoming for them to have outside speakers and situations like that. So that's something that's sort of like on my mind that I can touch base with you in the fall, Mandy. And then our resilient community is another group in the area that is very focused on the outreach of learners who are homeschooling in the LGBTQ plus community. And so they're going to have different resources. Their topics are very focused on students who want to get into those sorts of learning styles and particular subject matter. And they seem to have more of like an activist's mindset of the topics they're exploring. Again, geared towards older students, which is perfect for these resources for sort of an outreach opportunity. So I'm excited about both of those groups personally, once my kid ages up into that category.
I also wanted to just update, like, just give a 2024 stat, because I showed that old slide from 2023. Just that since 2019, there has been an estimated 30% increase in homeschoolers in enrollment. And so that's just like a huge, I mean, it's a huge growth area. And the last thing I was going to say is that there is no reason, yes, we're humanities based with a lot of our work, but it's also technologically based, and we are a perfect candidate to sort of bridge humanities and STEM because we can serve both communities at the same time when we attend those STEM events. And I think Rachel's, going from, you know, you know, 10 people to 70, like, you know what I mean? Our stats look pretty darn good in terms of who we've managed to reach. So that's all just very exciting.
I was attempting to answer the question in the chat, which was about if the groups are in collaboration with the state statistics in Georgia. I don't know, but my guess is no. Co-ops, my understanding is that they are operating completely outside of private, charter, or public school standards. To be a homeschooler, you submit a declaration of intent form once a year, and you pick your calendar days and you save that documentation. The Georgia Department of Education keeps a record of that declaration of intent, but that's it. The parent that signs it serves as the teacher, principal, everything. Like, you are everything. And so if you participate in a co-op or not, you can use those hours and those classes, save the documentation, and put that towards your students' hours for their academic year. But you are required in no way, whether you're with a co-op or not, to submit anything. You are required to participate in standardized testing every 3 years at a minimum. But even that, because we did that this year with my son, who's a 3rd grader. So he'll test again in 6th grade and then again in 9th grade. And those are required to maintain for your records. And again, like, for your future use, for his future transcript, should he ever transfer out of homeschooling and into any other learning situation. But you're not required to report them to the state. So I don't think the statistics, my understanding is that it's not required or really able to be reported in a measurable way, which is sort of a failing of that, actually. I think that there's probably a lot of great data there and a lot of opportunities that are being missed because people don't know what they don't know. And there's a lot people don't know about this growing group of folks. So. Yeah, so on the Georgia Department of Education's website, you can actually search for, if you're looking to forward patrons who are parents who may be interested in this, you can send them to that website. There is a Georgia online school that is not technically a homeschool, but it is sort of the virtual version of public schooling. So for parents who don't have the time or energy, particularly for an older student who may be able to stay at home, but they do want the student to benefit from home study, that's sometimes a good segue. And I actually know a lot of families who are not really homeschooling, but they have enrolled their student in the Georgia virtual school. So that's one option, especially for parents whose schedules or family units don't really make room for the parent to really be the teacher like that. But that's also on their website, where you will find the Georgia Declaration of Intent form. And it's like more simple than you think it would be. And it sends you a PDF and they tell you, you better print this for your records just in case. And that's it. So it's pretty easy to find on their website, though.
So I think we'll give it one last minute to see if anybody else has a question. This has been very interesting to listen to, though. It's a sector that we don't think about, right? And we should, for sure. So thank you both for doing work in the area.
Well, thank you. Thanks everyone. Thanks, Galileo.
Thank you for having
everyone.
us.